I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, gently touching the fresh cut running from my left temple to my cheek. Sarah had gotten me good this time, the crystal vase she'd thrown leaving a deep gash that no amount of concealer could hide completely. "Sophia." Mom's sharp voice came through the door. "You're going to be late for school pictures. Have you covered it up?" "I'm trying," I called back, dabbing more makeup over the wound. It stung, but not as much as yesterday when it happened. The bathroom door burst open. Sarah, my older sister and my parents' golden child, leaned against the doorframe with that familiar smirk. "Still can't cover my artwork, little sis." I stayed silent, focusing on my reflection. At 16, I learned that responding only made things worse. Sarah, 2 years older and infinitely more favored, had been marking me since we were children. It started with pinches, escalated to pushes, and now, well, the vase was just her latest creative expression. "Girls," Mom appeared behind Sarah, already looking exasperated. "Sophia, stop dawdling. Sarah, help your sister fix her makeup. We can't have her ruining the family photos with that incident." Incident. That's what they called it now. Like when Sarah broke my fingers last year, a door accident, or when she pushed me down the stairs. Clumsy teenager. Or when she burned my arm with her straightener. Sisters sharing beauty tools. Sarah grabbed the concealer from my hands. "Here, let me do it. I'm better at covering things up anyway." Her fingers pressed hard against the cut, making me wince. Mom watched from the doorway, nodding approvingly as the evidence of yesterday's violence slowly disappeared under layers of makeup. "Remember," Mom said quietly, "if anyone asks." I walked into a door. I recited dully, "I know, Mom." The drive to school was tense. Dad had already left for work, conveniently avoiding another morning of pretending everything was normal. He perfected the art of absence whenever Sarah's incidents occurred. In the school parking lot, Mom turned to face me. Straight to the photographer, then class. "No talking to counselors today." I nodded, remembering last month when the guidance counselor, Ms. Martinez, had started asking too many questions about my accidents. Sarah had made sure I learned my lesson of getting adults involved. The school gymnasium had been transformed into a photo studio. Students lined up in their best outfits, practicing smiles and fixing hair. I kept my head down, letting my long dark hair partially cover the left side of my face. "Sophia Bennett," the photographer called. He was new this year, not the usual local guy who'd photographed our family for years and knew better than to ask questions. I sat on a stool, arranging myself carefully. The photographer, a man in his 40s with kind eyes, adjusted his camera. "Can you move your hair back, please?" he asked. "We want to see your beautiful face." Reluctantly, I tucked my hair behind my ears. Through his viewfinder, I saw his expression change. He lowered the camera slowly. "Hold on a moment," he said, reaching for his phone. "I need to check something." Panic rose in my throat. "Please, it's nothing. I just had an accident." He looked at me steadily. "I've been a forensic photographer for 20 years before switching to school portraits. That cut, it has a distinct pattern I've seen before. From thrown objects, usually crystal or glass." My hand started shaking. Behind me, I could hear other students shuffling, waiting their turn. I walked into a door. I whispered, but my voice cracked. He picked up his camera again, but instead of taking my school photo, he took several close-ups of the cut, barely visible under the makeup. "No," he said quietly, "you didn't. And I'm guessing this isn't the first time, is it?" Tears welled up in my eyes, causing the concealer to run slightly, revealing more of the angry red line beneath. "My sister." I started and stopped, years of conditioning kicking in. The photographer nodded, understanding in his eyes. "You don't have to say anything else. But I do have to report this. It's not just my job. It's the right thing to do." As he reached for his phone again, I saw Sarah watching from the gymnasium entrance, her face twisted in fury. Mom stood beside her, already pulling out her own phone, probably to call Dad. The photographer saw them too. He positioned himself between me and the door, speaking quietly into his phone. For the first time in years, someone was finally seeing the truth behind the perfect family photos. Within 15 minutes, the gymnasium became a storm center. Ms. Martinez arrived first, her face tight with concern as she saw my partially revealed injury. Mom burst in right after, Sarah trailing behind with her perfectly practiced worried sister expression. "There's been a misunderstanding," Mom announced, her social mask firmly in place. "Sophie had an accident yesterday. We were going to have it checked after school." The photographer, Mr. Collins, I learned from his ID badge, stood his ground. "Mrs. Bennett, I've documented domestic violence cases for 2 decades. That cut has a distinct pattern consistent with thrown crystal or glass objects." Sarah stepped forward, tears suddenly appearing in her eyes. "I would never hurt my sister. We're best friends." But Mr. Collins was already showing Ms. Martinez something on his camera's display screen. Not just today's photos, but others he pulled up from his forensic photography days. "See the similarity in the laceration patterns?" Mom's hand gripped my shoulder painfully. "Sophia, tell them about the door accident." I looked at the 4 adults now surrounding me, Mr. Collins, Ms. Martinez, Mom, and the school nurse who just arrived. For years, I'd repeated the lies, covered the wounds, and played my part in our family's performance. But something in Mr. Collins's steady gaze gave me courage. "The crystal vase," I said quietly, my voice trembling. "The one Grandma gave us." Sarah threw it at me because I scored higher on my sets. The grip on my shoulder became brutal, but I kept going. "She broke my fingers last year with a piano lid, pushed me down the stairs at the mall 3 months ago, burned my arm with her straightener in June." Each word felt like breaking free from a chain. "There are pictures on my phone. I've been documenting everything." Sarah's fake tears dried instantly. "She's lying. She's always been jealous of me." Ms. Martinez pulled out her tablet. "Actually, I've been keeping my own documentation. Every accident, every suspicious injury, every time Sophia flinched when her sister came near." She turned to Mom. "We've called the police." Mom's face went white. "You can't. We're a respectable family." "Respectable families don't cover up abuse," Mr. Collins said firmly, still standing between me and Sarah. The gymnasium had emptied of other students, but I could see faces pressed against the windows. Our family's perfect facade was cracking in front of the whole school. "I have more proof," I said, my voice stronger now. "Hidden cameras in my room. After the stairs incident, I'd bought them with my tutoring money. Everything's uploaded to a cloud account." Sarah lunged forward suddenly, her mask completely gone. "You little snitch. I'll show you what happens to." She never finished her threat. 2 police officers walked in, followed by Dad, who must have been called from work. His face showed no surprise, just resignation. "Sarah Bennett?" one officer asked. "We need you to come with us." "Daddy," Sarah wailed, switching back to victim mode. "Tell them it's not true." But Dad just looked tired. "Enough, Sarah. It's over." As they led my sister away, Mom still gripping my shoulder like a lifeline, Mr. Collins showed me the photos he'd taken. In them, beneath the smeared makeup, you could clearly see not just the current cut but faint scars from previous accidents. "School photos usually hide the truth," he said gently. "These ones are going to reveal it. You're safe now." Ms. Martinez was already discussing temporary guardianship options with the officers, mentioning my aunt in the next town who'd always watched me with concerned eyes during family gatherings. Mom finally released my shoulder, her hand falling limply to her side. "We were just trying to keep the family together," she whispered. "No," I replied, finding strength in my voice. "You were trying to keep your illusion together. There's a difference." Dad stepped forward, looking at my face, really looking, for the first time in years. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I should have stopped this long ago." The nurse was examining my cut now, talking about proper medical documentation and treatment. But I hardly heard her. I was watching Mr. Collins pack up his camera, the tool that had finally broken through years of enforced silence. "Thank you," I told him, "for seeing what everyone else chose to ignore." He smiled sably. Sometimes the camera captures more truth than people are ready to see. But today it captured exactly what needed to be revealed. The following weeks transformed my life completely. Sarah was admitted to a psychiatric facility after a thorough evaluation revealed deep-seated issues beyond her violence toward me. Mom and Dad faced criminal charges for years of covering up the abuse, and I moved in with Aunt Claire, who cried when she saw the full documentation of what had been happening. "I always suspected," she said, holding me close, "but they were so good at making everything look perfect." The school became a surprising source of support. Students who had once whispered about my clumsiness now came forward with their own observations. Emily, a girl from my chemistry class, shared videos she'd taken of Sarah threatening me in the hallways. The basketball team captain admitted he'd seen Sarah push me down the stairs at the mall, but had been too uncertain to report it. Mr. Collins's photos became part of the official investigation. He testified at the hearing, his expertise as a former forensic photographer lending weight to the case. These injuries tell a story of systematic abuse, he explained to the judge, showing a timeline of my documented injuries. Each one was carefully concealed, but the patterns are unmistakable. 1 month after the school photo incident, I sat in Aunt Claire's kitchen, looking at my reflection in her phone camera. The cut had healed into a faint scar, barely visible unless you knew where to look. But other changes were more apparent. I stood straighter, spoke louder, smiled more freely. The prosecutor called. Aunt Claire said, setting a mug of hot chocolate in front of me. Sarah's doctors recommend long-term treatment. Your parents have agreed to plead guilty to child endangerment. I nodded, feeling strangely calm. And the restraining order? Approved. They can't come within 500 feet of you until you're 18. After that, it's your choice. My phone buzzed with a text from Ms. Martinez. College counselors meeting tomorrow. Several universities are interested in your story. Full scholarship possibilities. Another message followed, this one from Mr. Collins. New photography club starting next semester. Thought you might be interested. Sometimes the best way to heal is to help others see the truth. I touched my scar gently, remembering how makeup once covered not just my injuries but my entire reality. Now, each morning, I looked in the mirror and saw strength instead of secrets. You know what's ironic? I said to Aunt Claire. Sarah always said I was ruining the perfect family photos. But it took a photographer to finally capture the truth and save me. Aunt Claire squeezed my hand. Sometimes the truth hurts before it heals. Later that evening, I opened my laptop and created a new cloud folder titled Moving Forward. Inside, I placed Mr. Collins's photos, not to remember the pain, but to remind myself of the day someone finally saw through the perfect family facade and chose to act. The last photo in the series wasn't of my injury. It was a simple portrait Mr. Collins had taken after everything calmed down. Just me, looking directly into the camera. No makeup, no hiding, no pretense. In my eyes, there was something new. Hope. A text from an unknown number popped up on my phone. Sarah, using a hospital phone. You ruined everything. We could have been the perfect family. I looked at my reflection in the window, at the scar that told my story of survival, and typed back, perfect isn't worth the price of pretending. Get help, Sarah. I'd already have. Then I blocked the number and turned back to my laptop, where Mr. Collins's photography club application waited. Sometimes the best revenge isn't in hiding the truth, but in helping others reveal it. The perfect family photos had shattered, but from the broken pieces, I was building something real, something true, something mine. 6 months after the school photo incident, I stood in front of a different camera. This time, I was speaking at a conference about domestic violence, sharing my story with other survivors. Mr. Collins sat in the audience, his camera capturing these moments of strength rather than concealment. The hardest part wasn't the physical pain, I told the crowd. It was the silence, the makeup, the perfect family photos that hid years of abuse. But now I know, sometimes it takes just one person to break that silence. The changes in my life had been dramatic but healing. Sarah remained in treatment, her doctors discovering years of untreated mental health issues beneath her perfectly maintained exterior. My parents, facing the consequences of their choices, had been sentenced to community service and mandatory counseling. But the biggest changes were within me. Sophia, Ms. Martinez called out after my speech. The scholarship committee is here. They'd like to meet you. I smoothed down my blazer, no longer hiding behind long hair or layers of concealer. The scar on my face had faded to a thin line, a reminder of survival rather than shame. The committee members were from several prestigious universities, drawn not just by my academic record, but by the advocacy work I'd started. The photography club Mr. Collins helped me establish had evolved into a student-run organization documenting and preventing abuse. Your project behind perfect pictures is remarkable, one committee member said. Using photography to help other students recognize and report abuse, it's making a real difference. I thought about the 3 students who'd already come forward, their own stories of hidden violence brought to light through our work. Each time, Mr. Collins helped document their evidence, turning his expertise toward protection rather than just exposure. Aunt Claire waited for me after the meeting, beaming with pride. Living with her had shown me what real family support looked like. No masks, no forced perfection, just honest love and acceptance. "Your mother called," she said quietly as we walked to the car. "She's been attending her counseling sessions. Wants to know if you consider meeting with her in a supervised setting." I considered it, touching my scar thoughtfully. "Maybe, but not yet. I'm still learning who I am without their version of perfect." That evening, I had a video call with Sarah's therapist. My sister's progress was slow but real, the layers of her own trauma gradually being addressed. "She asked about you," the therapist said. Not in anger this time. She's beginning to understand what she did. I nodded, remembering the last family photo we'd taken before everything changed. All of us smiling, my collar carefully arranged to hide bruises, Sarah's hand gripping my shoulder in warning. "Tell her I'm doing well," I replied, "and that when she's ready to see the real me, not the sister she tried to break, we can talk." Later, I worked on my latest project, a photo essay about survivors. Mr. Collins had taught me how to use a camera to reveal truth rather than hide it. Each image showed strength emerging from darkness, beauty and authenticity rather than perfection. My phone buzzed with messages from the support group I joined. "Your speech today gave me courage to speak up. Thank you for showing us that scars don't define us. You helped me stop hiding." I opened my laptop to finish my college application essay. The prompt asked about a life-changing moment. I wrote about a school photographer who looked through his viewfinder and saw what everyone else had chosen to ignore. "The perfect family portrait shattered that day," I wrote, "but from its broken pieces, I built something stronger, my own truth, my own voice, my own future." A final text came from Mr. Collins. "Next week's photography club topic, capturing truth. Would you like to share your story?" I smiled, touching my scar one last time before replying, "Yes," because sometimes the most powerful images are the ones that show what's really beneath the surface. The sun was setting outside Aunt Claire's house, casting long shadows that reminded me of how far I come from hiding in darkness. Sometimes the deepest wounds heal into the strongest parts of us, and the pictures we're most afraid to show become our most powerful testament to survival. I'll never forget the look on my daughter Emma's face when she opened her grandmother's gift. The excitement in her bright blue eyes dimmed as she stared at the contents, a box filled with garden soil, crowned with a cruel note that read, "This is what you deserve. My name is Olivia," and watching my 10-year-old daughter's birthday party turn into a stage for my mother-in-law, Margaret's cruelty made my blood boil. But I have learned over the years that sometimes the best revenge isn't immediate, it's perfectly planned. "What's wrong, sweetie?" Margaret's sugary voice cut through the silence. "I thought you loved playing in the dirt, just like your mother." She shot me a pointed look, referencing my work as a community garden coordinator. Emma's lower lip trembled, but she held her head high, a gesture that made my heart swell with pride. "Thank you, Grandma," she said softly, placing the box aside. My husband Tom's grip on my shoulder tightened, his jaw clenched. The other parents at the party shifted uncomfortably, while the children clustered around Emma, their innocent confusion evident. My sister-in-law, Amanda, Margaret's golden child, smirked from her perch on the couch. "Mom," Tom started, his voice strained, but Margaret waved him off. "Oh, don't be so sensitive. It's just a little joke. Besides, Emma needs to learn that she can't expect special treatment just because it's her birthday." Margaret's words dripped with the same venom I'd endured for the past 12 years. You see, Margaret had never approved of me. I wasn't from the right family, didn't have the right career, and worst of all, I'd stolen her precious son from the future she'd planned for him. When Emma was born, I'd hoped things would change. Instead, Margaret's disdain simply extended to include our daughter. But what Margaret didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Emma and I had been working on something special for the past 6 months. Something that would change everything. I caught Emma's eye and gave her our secret signal. A tiny wink that meant trust me. She straightened her shoulders, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Well," I said, standing up, "why don't we move on to the cake?" Emma helped design it herself. As I walked to the kitchen, I heard Margaret's stage whisper to Amanda, Probably some homemade disaster. You know how Olivia insists on doing everything herself instead of buying proper things like normal people. I smiled to myself, remembering the seed catalog Emma and I had been poring over last night, planning her next project. Margaret had no idea that her joke gift would become part of something beautiful. The party continued with Emma's friends successfully distracting her from the incident. They played games, ate cake, and opened other presents, normal gifts, filled with love and thought. Through it all, Margaret sat like a queen on her throne, making little comments about how simple the party was compared to the extravagant affairs she used to throw for Amanda. After the last guest left, Emma helped me clean up, her usual chatter subdued. "Mom," she said finally, "why does Grandma hate us so much?" I pulled her into a hug, breathing in the sweet scent of her shampoo. "She doesn't hate us, sweetie. She just doesn't understand us. But sometimes, when people are mean, the best response is to grow something beautiful from it." Emma's eyes lit up with understanding. "Like our secret project." Exactly like our secret project. I glanced at the box of dirt, still sitting where Emma had placed it. "And you know what? I think your grandmother just gave us exactly what we needed for the final piece." That evening, after Emma went to bed, Tom and I had a long talk. He'd been trying to mediate between his mother and us for years, always caught in the middle. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice heavy with guilt. "I never thought she'd do something like this to Emma." I took his hand, squeezing it gently. "It's not your fault, but maybe it's time we showed your mother exactly what we're capable of growing." 2 weeks later, we invited the entire family over for a special dinner. Margaret arrived last, naturally, making a grand entrance with Amanda in tow. "I hope this isn't another one of your homegrown meals," she said, air quoting with her perfectly manicured fingers. "Actually," I replied, maintaining my composure, "Emma has something she'd like to show everyone. Especially you, Margaret." Emma appeared from the garden, holding a beautifully wrapped package. Her eyes shone with excitement and something else, the quiet confidence of someone who knows they're about to change everything. What happened next would shake Margaret's perfectly ordered world to its core. But as I watched Emma approach her grandmother with that package, I knew that sometimes the best way to handle cruelty is to nurture something unexpected, something that can bloom even in the darkest soil. Little did Margaret know, she was about to learn that the dirt she'd given as an insult would become the foundation of a transformation none of us could have predicted. Emma held out the package to Margaret, who took it with obvious reluctance. "What's this?" she asked, eyeing the beautiful wrapping paper decorated with hand-painted flowers. "Open it, Grandma," Emma said softly. "We used the dirt you gave me to help make it." The room fell silent as Margaret carefully unwrapped the gift. Inside was a handmade photo album, but unlike any photo album she'd ever seen. The cover was embedded with dried flowers and herbs, all grown from the soil she'd given Emma as a cruel joke. But it was what was inside that made Margaret's hands begin to shake. The first page showed a black and white photo, one I found in Tom's old family albums. It was Margaret as a young girl, kneeling in her mother's garden, her face bright with joy as she held up a freshly picked tomato. Beside it was a photo of Emma in our community garden, striking the exact same pose. Where did you get this?" Margaret whispered, her perfectly composed facade cracking slightly. "Dad helped us find it," Emma explained. "Mom said you used to love gardening with your mom, just like I love gardening with her." Margaret's fingers trembled as she turned the pages. Each spread showed parallel moments, Margaret's childhood memories mirrored by similar photos of Emma, playing in the sprinklers, making flower crowns, selling vegetables at market stands. The similarities were striking, undeniable. Amanda leaned over her mother's shoulder, her usual smirk fading as she saw the careful detail we'd put into each page. "Is that Grandma's old garden?" she asked, pointing to one of the vintage photos. "Yes," Tom said, speaking up. "Remember how Mom used to tell us stories about helping Grandma Helen grow prize-winning roses? Emma's been growing the same variety in our garden, from seeds Mom's mother saved." Margaret's head snapped up. "That's impossible. Those roses died with my mother." I shook my head, gesturing toward our backyard. "Would you like to see them?" Without waiting for an answer, Emma took her grandmother's hand and led her through the French doors to our garden. There, in full bloom, were Helen's prized roses, their distinctive pink and white petals exactly as Margaret remembered them. "But how?" Margaret's voice cracked. We found the seed packets in that old trunk you gave Dad last year, Emma explained. Mom helped me learn how to grow them, just like great-grandma Helen taught you. Margaret stood frozen, staring at the roses. I could see the memories washing over her. Memories of warm summer days, of dirty hands and proud smiles, of a mother's patient teaching. All the things she'd buried beneath years of social climbing and perfect appearances. There's more, Emma said, turning to a section near the back of the album. These pages showed something different, newspaper clippings about the community garden where I worked, specifically about our program teaching children to grow their own food. And there was Margaret again, this time in a yellowed article from 40 years ago, standing proudly beside her mother at a community garden fundraiser. You kept this? Margaret asked Tom, her finger tracing the old newsprint. Of course I did, Mom. It was one of the few times I remember seeing you truly happy. Amanda shifted uncomfortably, perhaps seeing for the first time a side of her mother she'd never known. The little girl who found joy in simple things, who didn't need designer labels or social status to feel worthy. Emma flipped to the final page, where we pressed flowers from every plant we'd grown using the soil from Margaret's gift. Marigolds, zinnias, herbs, and of course, rose petals from Helen's heritage roses. See, Grandma, Emma said, her voice full of innocence and hope. Your gift wasn't mean at all. It helped us grow all these beautiful things, just like you used to do. Margaret's perfectly applied mascara began to run as tears formed in her eyes. She looked at the dirt under Emma's fingernails, so similar to how her own hands used to look after a day in the garden with her mother. For the first time, she seemed to truly see her granddaughter, not as some imperfect extension of her disapproval of me, but as a reflection of her own childhood joy. The silence in the garden was broken only by the gentle buzzing of bees among the flowers. We all stood there, watching as years of carefully constructed walls began to crumble around Margaret, brought down not by confrontation or anger, but by the simple power of shared memories and growing things. What happened next would change our family forever. But as I watched Margaret reach out to touch one of Helen's roses, I knew we'd already planted the seeds of something extraordinary. Margaret's perfectly manicured hand trembled as she touched the rose petal, a single tear rolling down her cheek. Then something extraordinary happened. She slipped off her expensive heels and stepped barefoot into the garden soil. Mom? Amanda's voice held a note of shock I'd never heard before. Your grandmother, Margaret began, her voice thick with emotion, used to say you could never truly understand a garden unless you felt the earth beneath your feet. She looked at Emma, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time. Would you show me what else you've grown? Emma's face lit up like a sunrise. She took her grandmother's hand, leading her through the garden beds we carefully tended together. These tomatoes are from great-grandma Helen's seeds too, she explained, pointing to the heavy vines. And look, the herbs we used to press into the album cover are growing right here. As I watched them, Tom slipped his arm around my waist. You planned this all along, didn't you? He whispered. I smiled, remembering the moment I'd discovered those old photos and seed packets. Sometimes people just need to be reminded of who they used to be. For the next hour, Emma proudly showed Margaret every plant, every flower, every carefully tended bed. Margaret listened intently, occasionally sharing memories of her own childhood garden. Her perfect hair became slightly disheveled, her designer outfit dusty. But for once, she didn't seem to care. You know, Margaret said finally, turning to me, my mother would have loved this garden. She always said the best things in life couldn't be bought. She paused, struggling with words that clearly didn't come easily. I forgot that somewhere along the way. I forgot a lot of things. Amanda had been unusually quiet, watching this transformation with wide eyes. Now she stepped forward hesitantly. Mom, I never knew about any of this, about you and Grandma Helen's garden. No, you wouldn't have. Margaret replied softly. I was so busy trying to give you everything I thought was important. I forgot to give you the things that actually were. That evening, as we sat around our patio table enjoying a meal made with vegetables from our garden, Margaret shared stories we'd never heard before. Stories of summer afternoons spent shelling peas with her mother, of winning ribbons at the county fair for their roses, of the simple joy of watching seeds sprout into life. Emma, she said suddenly, setting down her fork, would you be willing to teach me how to garden again? It's been so long, and clearly you've learned all the secrets I forgot. Emma beamed. Really? We could make it a special project, just us. And Mom could help too, she added, looking at me hopefully. I'd like that, Margaret said, meeting my eyes. The hardness that had always been there was gone, replaced by something softer, more genuine. If you're willing, Olivia. Of course, I replied, feeling the last bits of tension between us begin to melt away. We could start next weekend. The fall planting season is just beginning. Perfect timing for roses, Margaret and Emma said simultaneously, then laughed in surprise at their shared knowledge. Over the next few months, our weekend gardening sessions became a family tradition. Margaret traded her designer gardening gloves for practical ones, and gradually, the woman who had once given my daughter a box of dirt as an insult began to reappear. The one who had once found joy in simple things, in growing and nurturing life. Amanda started joining us too, bringing her own children to learn about the family legacy of gardening. Our harvest dinners became weekly events, filled with laughter, stories, and food we'd grown ourselves. A year later, at Emma's 11th birthday party, Margaret arrived with a very special gift, Helen's old gardening journal, filled with handwritten notes, pressed flowers, and generations of wisdom. I think it's time this was passed on, she said, hugging Emma tightly. You're the one who reminded me what it means to grow something beautiful. As I watched them together, I thought about how the cruelest gift had somehow sprouted into the most beautiful blessing. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about helping someone remember who they were always meant to be. Emma and Margaret now spend every Saturday morning in the garden, sharing secrets and stories, their hands dirty, their hearts full. The roses continue to bloom, a living testament to the power of growth and forgiveness. And that box of dirt, we kept it, displayed prominently in our garden shed. Not as a reminder of hurt, but as proof that even from the darkest soil, something beautiful can grow if you just know how to nurture it. Sometimes at sunset, I watch them together, grandmother and granddaughter, tending their garden, building new memories, and I'm reminded that the most powerful way to overcome cruelty is not with more cruelty, but with patience, understanding, and the willingness to help something beautiful grow. After all, that's what gardeners do best. We take what we're given, no matter how humble, and transform it into something extraordinary. And in our family's case, we didn't just grow flowers, we grew healing, understanding, and love. Consider it a housewarming gift, Evelyn said, her perfectly manicured hands extending the wrapped package toward me. Her smile didn't reach her eyes as I accepted the oddly shaped parcel, its wrapping paper slightly torn at the edges. The weight of it surprised me, heavier than I expected, and something shifted inside as I set it on our new dining room table. My name is Sarah Williams, and at 32, I thought I'd finally gotten used to my mother-in-law's peculiar way of showing affection, but nothing could have prepared me for what lay beneath that faded wrapping paper. Go ahead, open it, she urged, that familiar hint of satisfaction in her voice. The same tone she used when commenting on my interesting choice of career as an art teacher or my unique approach to decorating our home. I carefully pulled back the paper, revealing what appeared to be an antique mirror. At first glance, it might have been beautiful, an ornate golden frame with intricate Victorian details. But as I lifted it from the wrapping, my heart sank. A large crack ran diagonally across the glass, splintering into smaller fissures like a spider's web. It suits you, don't you think? Evelyn's voice dripped with false sweetness. I found it in our attic. Thought you might appreciate something with character. She emphasized the last word, her eyes flickering to the various vintage pieces I carefully curated for our new home. My husband, Thomas, was in the kitchen preparing coffee, blissfully unaware of the tension in the dining room. This was how it always went, Evelyn's subtle jabs delivered when we were alone, her perfectly crafted persona of the doting mother-in-law appearing whenever others were present. Thank you, I managed, running my fingers along the frame. Despite the broken glass, there was something hauntingly beautiful about it. The craftsmanship in the frame alone was exquisite, even beneath years of tarnish and neglect. Well, Evelyn sighed, adjusting her designer handbag on her shoulder, I suppose not everyone can afford new things. Some of us have to make do with broken pieces. Her words cut deeper than the cracks in the mirror, but I refused to let her see how much they stung. After she left, Thomas emerged from the kitchen with 2 cups of coffee. Everything okay? What did Mom bring us? I showed him the mirror, watching his face fall slightly. Oh, well, that's thoughtful of her. He was always trying to see the best in his mother, even when her actions spoke volumes about her true intentions. "It's perfect, actually," I said, surprising both of us. An idea was already forming in my mind, something that would either prove to be brilliant or disastrous. That evening, after Thomas had gone to bed, I sat in my small home studio, examining the mirror under the warm glow of my work lamp. I'd always had a knack for seeing potential in damaged things. It's what drew me to teaching art to troubled teens, helping them find beauty in their own chaos. The frame was genuine gold leaf under years of tarnish, and the glass, despite its breaks, was old mercury glass. The kind they stopped making over a century ago due to its toxic manufacturing process. This wasn't just some broken mirror, it was a piece of history. I opened my laptop and began researching restoration techniques, my excitement growing with each article I read. But I didn't want to simply restore it. I wanted to transform it, to take Evelyn's intended insult and turn it into something extraordinary. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into the project. During my free periods at school, I researched Victorian art techniques. My students became intrigued, watching as I experimented with different methods during our art classes. "Mrs. Williams, are you really going to use real gold?" Maria, one of my most talented students, asked as I demonstrated gold leafing techniques. "Not just gold," I smiled, showing her my sketches. "We're going to learn about kintsugi too, the Japanese art of repairing broken things with gold, making them more beautiful than before." The mirror became more than just a project. It became a symbol of everything I wanted to prove to Evelyn, to myself, to my students. Every crack in the glass would be transformed into a golden river, every tarnished detail restored and enhanced. I worked late into the nights, carefully applying gold leaf to each fracture, turning the spider web of breaks into a deliberate pattern of gleaming lines. The frame itself I restored with a mixture of traditional and modern techniques, bringing out details that had been hidden under decades of neglect. Some nights, Thomas would find me in my studio, covered in gold leaf and restoration compounds. "You're really putting a lot into this," he observed one evening, bringing me a cup of tea. "It's not just about the mirror anymore," I admitted, showing him how the broken glass now caught the light differently, the gold-filled cracks creating patterns that seemed almost alive. "Mom's coming for dinner next week," he mentioned cautiously. "Should we put the mirror away before she visits?" I shook my head, a small smile playing at my lips. "No, actually, I think it's time we gave it a proper place of honor, right above the fireplace in the living room." What Evelyn didn't know, what none of them knew yet, was that I'd been documenting every step of the restoration. My students had helped me create a video series about transforming broken things into art, and it had started gaining attention online. The techniques we developed weren't just beautiful, they were innovative. As I hung the mirror in its new place, catching my reflection in the now golden network of restored glass, I felt a sense of quiet triumph. Evelyn had given me this mirror to make a point about being broken, about not being good enough. But in doing so, she handed me exactly what I needed to prove her wrong. Little did she know, this was just the beginning of a transformation that would leave her speechless. The evening of the family dinner arrived, and I could feel my heart racing as I made final adjustments to the dining room. The mirror hung proudly above the fireplace, its golden veins catching the soft light from the chandelier. I'd arranged the room so it would be impossible to miss, the focal point of our entire living space. "The table looks beautiful," Thomas said, adjusting his tie, "though Mom might comment on us using the casual plates." He tried to make it sound like a joke, but we both knew it was probably true. Evelyn had a way of finding fault with even the most carefully planned details. The doorbell rang at exactly 6 o'clock. Evelyn's punctuality was one of her many points of pride. I smoothed my dress and took a deep breath, reminding myself that tonight wasn't about her approval. It was about something much bigger. "Sarah, Thomas," she greeted us, air kissing our cheeks. Behind her, my father-in-law Robert offered a warm, genuine smile. He'd always been the buffer between Evelyn's sharp edges and the rest of the world. "I brought a lovely Bordeaux. I assume you have proper wine glasses." Before I could respond, she stepped into the living room and froze. The wine bottle slipped from her grasp, and Thomas barely caught it before it hit the floor. Her eyes were fixed on the mirror, wide with disbelief. What have you done?" she whispered, stepping closer to the fireplace. The mirror she'd given me as an insult now dominated the room, its restored frame gleaming with authentic gold leaf. Every crack transformed into an intricate pattern that seemed to flow like liquid gold across the surface. Beautiful, isn't it? I said calmly, watching her reaction in the mirror's reflection. Your gift inspired quite a journey. But it was broken, she stammered, reaching out to touch the glass before pulling her hand back. The frame was worthless. Actually, Robert spoke up, adjusting his glasses as he examined the mirror. This is extraordinary craftsmanship. The technique you've used here, is this kintsugi inspired? I smiled, genuinely pleased by his interest. Yes, combined with traditional Victorian restoration methods. My students helped me research the historical techniques. Students? Evelyn turned to me, her composed facade cracking slightly. Oh, you haven't seen the videos? I pulled out my phone, opening the series that had now gathered over 1 million views. The restoration process became quite popular online. We've had museums reach out about the techniques we developed. Thomas, who had been quiet until now, stepped forward proudly. Sarah's been invited to speak at the National Restoration Convention next month. They're particularly interested in her method of combining Eastern and Western restoration philosophies. The color drained from Evelyn's face as she watched the video. There it was, her worthless gift being transformed step by step, each crack filled with gold, each tarnished detail restored to its former glory. But it wasn't just restored. It was reimagined into something entirely new. The museum curator estimated its value at about $60,000 now. I added quietly, watching her hands tremble slightly as she handed back my phone. But of course, it's not about the money. It's about seeing the potential in things others might consider broken. Dinner that evening was unusually quiet. Evelyn, normally quick with criticism about everything from my cooking to my choice of tablecloth, seemed lost in thought. Several times I caught her glancing at the mirror, her expression unreadable. As we served dessert, Robert cleared his throat. You know, Sarah, this reminds me of something. Evelyn, didn't your grandmother have a collection of Victorian mirrors? The ones in the attic. Evelyn's spoon clattered against her plate. Robert, I don't think. Yes, there must be at least a dozen up there, he continued, even missing or ignoring his wife's discomfort. All in various states of disrepair. We've been meaning to get them appraised for years. They're family heirlooms, Evelyn cut in sharply, not some common craft project. Actually, I said, meeting her gaze steadily, I'd be happy to take a look at them. These restoration techniques work best when applied to pieces with genuine historical value. My students would love to document the process for their portfolio. The suggestion hung in the air like a challenge. We both knew what she'd intended when she gave me that mirror, to remind me of what she thought I was. Broken, worthless, not good enough for her son or her family. Instead, I'd taken her weapon and turned it into my triumph. The articles about your restoration work have been fascinating, Robert added, pulling out his tablet. Did you see this one in Antiques Quarterly? They're calling it a revolution in historical preservation. As Robert shared the article with Thomas, I watched Evelyn's carefully maintained composure continue to crack. Like the mirror she'd given me, her perfect surface was starting to show its flaws. But unlike the mirror, these weren't flaws that could be filled with gold. More wine? I offered, noting her empty glass. For the first time since I'd known her, Evelyn seemed at a loss for words. She simply nodded, her eyes drifting back to the mirror that now served as a testament to everything she'd gotten wrong about me. What she'd intended as an insult had become the catalyst for something extraordinary. Those broken pieces she thought would define me had instead revealed a strength she never expected to find. The evening was far from over, and I could feel the shift in the air. Something had changed, not just in the way Evelyn saw me, but in the way I saw myself. Those cracks she tried to emphasize had become the very things that made me shine. And I was just getting started. A week after the dinner, I received an unexpected call from Robert. Sarah, he said, his voice warm but hesitant, I was wondering if you might have time to come look at those mirrors in the attic. Evelyn? Well, she's been up there all week, trying to sort through things. I found myself driving to the Victorian mansion the next Saturday morning. Thomas had offered to come, but somehow I knew this needed to be between me and his mother. The house was quiet when I arrived, except for muffled sounds coming from the attic. I climbed the narrow stairs, each step creaking with age, until I reached the top. There sat Evelyn, surrounded by dust-covered mirrors of various sizes, her usually perfect hair slightly disheveled. "Oh," she said, looking up as I entered. "Robert called you, didn't he?" Her voice lacked its usual sharp edge. Instead, she sounded tired, almost vulnerable. "He did," I acknowledged, carefully making my way through the maze of antiques. "These are incredible pieces." I stopped in front of a particularly ornate mirror, its frame dulled by decades of neglect but clearly masterfully crafted. "They were my grandmother's," Evelyn said softly, running her fingers along the tarnished frame. "She collected them her whole life. When she passed, I couldn't bear to. I just packed them all away up here." I knelt beside her, examining the mirror in her hands. "This one's Austrian, probably 1850s, I said. "The craftsmanship is remarkable, even under all this tarnish." "How do you know all this?" she asked, and for the first time, I heard genuine curiosity in her voice rather than criticism. "Research, mostly. When you gave me that mirror, I wanted to understand its history, its value. These pieces tell stories, Evelyn. They've survived world wars, crossed oceans, witnessed generations of families." She was quiet for a moment, then spoke so softly I almost missed it. "I was wrong. About the mirrors. About you." She set down the mirror she was holding, meeting my eyes directly. "I gave you that mirror to be cruel. I thought you were too simple, too ordinary for this family, but you saw something I never did. You didn't just fix what was broken. You made it more beautiful because of its flaws." I sat down beside her, dust swirling in the streams of light from the attic window. "Why did you really keep these mirrors up here?" Evelyn's hands trembled slightly, because I was afraid of failing them, of not doing justice to my grandmother's collection. It was easier to let them gather dust than risk doing the wrong thing. For the first time, I saw past Evelyn's perfect facade to the insecurity beneath. Her criticism of others had always been a shield, protecting her from her own fears of inadequacy. "You know," I said carefully, "my students have been looking for their next restoration project. These mirrors, they're exactly what we've been waiting for." "Your students?" She looked uncertain. "We could document everything, preserve the history. These pieces deserve to be seen, to tell their stories. And who better to share those stories than the granddaughter who loved them enough to keep them safe all these years?" Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes, the first real emotion I'd ever seen from her. I wouldn't even know where to begin. "That's why you have me," I smiled. "We can start small, maybe with this one." I picked up the Austrian mirror she'd been holding. Over the next few months, something unexpected happened. The attic became our workshop, a place where barriers slowly crumbled like the dust we cleaned from each mirror. Evelyn knew stories about every piece, where her grandmother had found them, what historical events they'd witnessed. I taught her restoration techniques, and she shared family histories that brought each mirror to life. My students were thrilled to be part of the project. We created a new video series, Reflections of the Past, Restoring Family History. It wasn't just about the technical aspects of restoration anymore. It was about healing, about bridging generations through shared purpose. The day we hung the first restored mirror, the Austrian piece, in Evelyn's dining room, she turned to me with tears in her eyes. "I spent so many years afraid of imperfection," she admitted, "but you showed me that the broken places, when filled with gold and love, become the most beautiful parts of all." Our story spread beyond just the antique community. People connected with the message of transformation, of finding beauty in broken things, of healing family relationships through shared creativity. The mirrors became a metaphor for something deeper, how we view ourselves, our families, our flaws. A year later, we hosted a gallery showing of the restored collection. Each mirror hung proudly, their gold-filled cracks telling stories of resilience and renewal. But the centerpiece was that first mirror, the one Evelyn had given me as an insult, now transformed into the catalyst that had changed everything. "You know," Evelyn said, standing beside me at the gallery opening, "I gave you that mirror thinking it would reflect your flaws. Instead, it reflected mine and showed me how to make them beautiful." I squeezed her hand gently. Sometimes the best gifts are the ones we don't intend to give. Thomas found us later, sharing coffee and restoration plans for the remaining mirrors. He shook his head in amazement. If someone had told me a year ago that my wife and mother would be business partners. Partners? I laughed. More like co-conspirators in mirror rescue missions. Evelyn smiled, a real, warm smile that reached her eyes. Well, someone has to keep the family legacy alive. And who better than the daughter who taught me to see beauty in broken things? As we stood there, surrounded by the gleaming mirrors that had brought us together, I realized that some reflections show us more than just our image. They show us who we can become when we choose to fill the cracks with gold instead of shame. The broken mirror that was meant to hurt me had instead created something far more precious than any antique, a genuine bond with the woman who had once tried to break my spirit. Together, we have learned that sometimes the most beautiful transformations come from the pieces we think are beyond repair. You're doing it all wrong, Emma sighed dramatically, snatching the wooden spoon from my hand. This is why everyone dreads your cooking, Sarah. You have no idea what you're doing in a kitchen. I stood there in my own kitchen, watching as my sister-in-law started correcting the sauce I'd been carefully preparing for our weekly family dinner. The recipe had been in my family for generations, passed down from my grandmother, who had taught me everything I knew about cooking. I've been making this sauce for years, I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. It's my grandmother's recipe. Emma rolled her eyes, adding more herbs without even tasting it. Well, clearly your grandmother wasn't much of a cook either. Trust me, I know what I'm doing. I watch all the cooking shows. The words stung more than I wanted to admit. My grandmother had been more than just a cook. She had been the heart of our family, bringing us together around her kitchen table with recipes that told stories of our heritage. Each dish was a memory, a piece of family history served with love and care. But ever since Emma married my brother David 2 months ago, she'd made it her mission to improve everything about our family gatherings, especially the food. According to her, everything I cooked was either too bland, too simple, or just plain wrong. Why don't you let me handle dinner from now on? Emma suggested, though it sounded more like a command. Mom and Dad will be so relieved to finally have some decent food at these gatherings. My parents, who had always praised my cooking and requested my dishes for every holiday, had recently started complimenting Emma's modern take on family meals. Even David, who grew up loving our grandmother's recipes, now raved about Emma's exotic fusion dishes. I watched as she continued to transform my sauce, adding ingredients that would have made my grandmother shake her head in dismay. The familiar aroma that usually filled my kitchen during family dinners was disappearing, replaced by something that felt foreign and wrong. You know what? I said, untying my apron. You're right, the kitchen is all yours. Emma's face lit up with triumph. Finally, you're being sensible. Don't worry, I'll show you how it's really done. I walked out of my own kitchen, feeling like a stranger in my home. But instead of the defeat Emma probably expected me to feel, a plan was forming in my mind. In my bedroom, hidden in my grandmother's old recipe box, was something that could change everything. I retrieved the wooden box from my closet, its surface worn smooth from years of loving use. Inside, among the yellowed recipe cards and handwritten notes, was a special envelope my grandmother had given me before she passed away. This is more than just a recipe, dear heart, she had told me, her eyes twinkling. It's our family's story in a dish. Share it only when the time is right, when someone needs to understand what cooking really means. I hadn't opened it yet, waiting for that right moment. Now listening to Emma rattle pans in my kitchen while lecturing everyone about proper cooking techniques, I knew the time had come. Opening the envelope with trembling fingers, I read through the recipe, tears welling in my eyes. It wasn't just instructions for cooking, it was a letter to me, explaining the history behind each ingredient, the memories attached to each step. This wasn't just food, it was love written in measurements and methods. From downstairs, I could hear Emma announcing her plans to host all future family dinners. Sarah's kitchen is just so basic, she was saying. My new copper cookware collection would be much better for proper entertaining. I tucked the recipe carefully into my pocket. Next week's dinner would be at Emma's house, her first time hosting. She didn't know it yet, but I would be bringing more than just a side dish to share. My phone buzzed with a text from David. Emma's really excited about hosting. Maybe you could learn something from her? I typed back a simple response. Don't worry, I have the perfect recipe to share. Looking at my grandmother's recipe box one last time before putting it away, I smiled. Emma thought cooking was about impressing people, about showing off and being modern. She was about to learn what my grandmother had taught me years ago, that the most important ingredient in any dish isn't found on a cooking show or in a fancy copper pot. Sometimes the best recipes aren't about the food at all. As I headed back downstairs, Emma was already planning her menu for next week, listing ingredients I could barely pronounce. The family nodded along, caught up in her enthusiasm. None of them noticed the quiet smile on my face. My grandmother always said timing was everything in cooking and in life. And next week, when I shared her special recipe, Emma would learn exactly what she'd been missing in her perfectly plated, precisely measured dishes. The secret ingredient wasn't in any cookbook, and it was about to change everything. The following week, I stood at Emma's doorstep holding a simple covered dish. She greeted me with her usual air of superiority, eyeing my contribution with barely concealed disdain. "Oh, you didn't have to bring anything," she said, her perfectly painted lips curved in a dismissive smile. "I've prepared everything already, professional grade, of course." Her kitchen was a showcase of modern appliances and expensive cookware. Copper pots gleamed from hooks, and specialized gadgets lined the counters. The warm, lived-in feel of family kitchen was nowhere to be found. "Trust me," I said softly, "you'll want to try this." Emma's dinner party was exactly what she promised. Elaborate, sophisticated, and completely soulless. Each dish looked like it had jumped straight from a magazine cover, arranged with surgical precision. My parents and David praised every course, though I noticed they took small portions and left most uneaten. And for dessert, Emma announced proudly, "I've prepared a deconstructed tiramisu with coffee-infused molecular gastronomy spheres." That was my cue. I stood up, retrieving my covered dish from the kitchen. "Actually, I'd like to share something first, if that's okay." Emma's face tightened, but social graces prevented her from refusing. I placed the dish in the center of the table and removed the cover, revealing what appeared to be a simple apple pie. "Really, Sarah?" Emma couldn't hide her contempt. "A basic pie, after my 5-course gourmet meal?" I ignored her tone and began serving slices. "This isn't just any pie," I said, pulling my grandmother's letter from my pocket. "This is our family story." As everyone took their first bites, I started reading. "My dearest Sarah, the recipe I'm sharing isn't just about apples and cinnamon. Each ingredient carries a piece of our history. The apples come from the trees your grandfather planted when we first bought our house, the same trees you climbed as a child. The cinnamon reminds me of autumn afternoons when your mother was young, helping me bake while telling me about her day at school. The butter for the crust comes from the recipe my mother taught me during the war, and we had to make do with what we had. She showed me that love makes everything taste better, even in hard times. The sugar represents the sweetness of family gatherings, of laughter around our table, of celebrations and comfort in times of sorrow. But the most important ingredient isn't listed in the measurements. It's the memories we fold into every dish, the love we share through food, the stories that season our lives better than any spice could." I looked up from the letter. Emma had stopped eating, her fork frozen halfway to her mouth. A tear rolled down her cheek. "This," she whispered, "this tastes exactly like the pie my own grandmother used to make, before she passed away." Her voice cracked. "I never got her recipe. She died before she could teach me." The room fell silent as Emma took another bite, more tears falling. I remember sitting in her kitchen, watching her bake. She never measured anything exactly, drove me crazy trying to learn from her. But somehow, it always turned out perfect. My mother reached over and squeezed Emma's hand. "Sometimes the best recipes can't be measured," she said gently. Emma looked down at her plate, then at her elaborate kitchen with all its shiny, unused equipment. I thought if I could make everything perfect, technical, professional, maybe I'd finally feel like I belonged in this family, like I had something special to offer. "Oh, sweetheart," my mother said, "you already belong. You don't have to prove anything." I pulled out another envelope from my pocket, a copy I'd made of my grandmother's recipe. "The secret ingredient isn't perfect technique or expensive equipment," I said, sliding it across the table to Emma. "It's love, and that's something worth sharing." Emma picked up the envelope with trembling hands. "Would you?" She paused, wiping her eyes. "Would you teach me? Not just the recipe, but the stories too. I want to learn what really makes a family kitchen special." Looking around the table at my family's faces, my parents' proud smiles, David's loving gaze at his wife, and Emma's tearful but genuine request, I knew my grandmother's recipe had worked its magic once again. "Of course," I said warmly. "We can start right now." The following Sunday morning, my kitchen was filled with the familiar scent of baking apples and cinnamon. Emma stood beside me at the counter, her designer outfit replaced by a simple apron, carefully peeling apples just as I'd shown her. "Like this?" she asked, her voice carrying none of its usual superiority. Instead, there was an eagerness to learn that reminded me of myself at my grandmother's counter years ago. "Perfect," I smiled, showing her how to cut the apples into even slices. "Now tell me about your grandmother's kitchen. What do you remember most?" Emma's hand slowed as she thought. "She had this old wooden spoon," she said softly. "It was worn smooth from years of use. She used to let me lick cookie dough off it when Mom wasn't looking." She laughed, then wiped away a tear with her sleeve. As we worked together, more memories surfaced. Emma told me about Sunday mornings with her grandmother, about failed attempts at cookies that turned into family jokes, and about the last pie they made together before she got sick. "I was so angry when she passed," Emma admitted, carefully mixing the pie filling. "I thought she'd left me without teaching me everything I needed to know, so I threw myself into learning professional techniques, thinking that would somehow make up for what I lost." I showed her how to crimp the edges of the pie crusts, the way my grandmother had taught me. "Sometimes the most important lessons aren't about technique at all," I said gently. "I see that now," Emma replied, her fingers carefully following mine. "That's why I was so difficult when I first joined the family. I thought I had to prove myself, be better than everyone else at everything, especially cooking." The timer dinged for our first pie, and together we pulled it from the oven. The golden brown crust gleamed, and the aroma filled the kitchen with warmth and memories. "It's not perfect," Emma fretted, noting the slightly uneven crimping. "Look closer," I said, pointing to where the crust had bubbled and browned. "Those little imperfections, that's what makes it unique. That's what makes it yours." David arrived just then, following his nose to the kitchen. He stopped in the doorway, taking in the sight of his wife and sister working side by side, flour dusting our aprons, laughter in our eyes. "Something smells amazing," he said, reaching for a slice. Emma playfully swatted his hand away. "Wait until it cools." Sarah taught me that patience is part of the recipe too. The pride in David's eyes as he looked at his wife made my heart swell. This was what my grandmother had meant about the power of sharing more than just recipes. Over the next few hours, as we baked pies for the upcoming family dinner, Emma and I shared stories, laughed at our mistakes, and created new memories. She told me about her dreams of opening a small cafe someday, not a fancy restaurant like she'd originally planned, but a cozy place where people could feel at home. "Maybe," she said hesitantly, "we could do it together. Your grandmother's recipes, combined with some of my modern touches." The suggestion took me by surprise, but as I thought about it, a smile spread across my face. "Actually, that sounds perfect." That evening, as our family gathered around the table, Emma proudly served her pie. It wasn't just dessert she was sharing. It was her heart, her memories, her newfound understanding of what makes a family recipe special. "Before everyone takes a bite," she said, her voice wavering slightly, "I want to share something. Sarah didn't just teach me how to make a pie this week. She taught me that the best flavors come from love, memories, and family." She turned to me, eyes shining. "Thank you for showing me what I was missing, for welcoming me into this family's kitchen." My mother squeezed my hand under the table as everyone tasted Emma's pie. The expressions on their faces said everything. This wasn't just good food, it was love made visible. Later, as we cleaned up together, Emma paused while drying a dish. "You know what's funny?" she said. "I spent so much time trying to prove I was better than everyone, when all I really needed to do was be myself." I handed her another plate, thinking of my grandmother's wisdom. Sometimes the best recipes aren't about the food at all. They're about family, Emma finished, smiling. "I get that now." Looking around my kitchen, at the flour-dusted counters, the lingering warmth from the oven, and my sister-in-law who had become a true sister, I knew my grandmother would be proud. Her recipe had done exactly what she intended. It had brought our family closer, one slice of pie at a time. The next morning, I found a note from Emma propped against my grandmother's recipe box. "Thank you for sharing more than just a recipe. You've given me back my grandmother's kitchen and shown me what it means to be part of a family. Looking forward to many more Sunday baking sessions with my sister. Love, Emma." I placed the note inside the recipe box, knowing it would become part of our family's story, just like every recipe within. Sometimes the sweetest endings come from the most unexpected ingredients.